Let's begin our countdown of the most cursed films of Hollywood's golden era and meet the actors who paid the price. 1. Wings, 1927, Where Flight Turned Deadly. Our first film, Wings, was the very first movie to ever win an Academy Award for Best Picture. It's a silent film about World War I fighter pilots. People cheered at the exciting airplane battle scenes, which looked amazingly real, maybe too real. To film these aerial battles, the director used real planes flown by stunt pilots. This was very risky because aviation was still new, and safety rules weren't as strong as they are now. During filming, several pilots had scary accidents. Some crashed their planes and got hurt. A few even lost their lives, either on set or while practicing stunts. These tragedies led some to call Wings a cursed production. The movie's team tried their best to keep everyone safe, but it was hard to avoid danger when using actual warplanes for stunts in the sky. One rumor says that after the film's success, people felt uneasy about celebrating a movie linked to so many accidents. Still, Wings became a box office hit and helped Hollywood see how exciting aerial footage could be. It also made stars out of actors Clara Bow, Charles Buddy Rogers, and Richard Arlen.
Wings, starring Clara Bow, Charles Buddy Rogers, Richard Arlen, and Gary Cooper, appearing in a role that launched his career.
Even though the film was loved by audiences, the tragic real-life crashes remain a sad part of its history. So, was Wings cursed? Or was it just a result of dangerous stunts and limited safety methods at the time? We may never know for sure, but the stories of brave pilots and sudden deaths certainly give this movie a heavy, haunted memory. 2. Hell's Angels, 1930. Planes, peril, and loss. Up next is Hell's Angels, produced by the famous billionaire Howard Hughes. This movie also focused on World War I pilots, much like Wings. Hughes was known for his love of flying and his willingness to take big risks. During production, he pushed for the most realistic flying scenes possible, which led to some dangerous decisions. To capture dramatic aerial footage, pilots flew in tricky formations. The weather often changed quickly, causing strong winds and fog. Several pilots, and even a mechanic, died in crashes on set. Hughes himself almost died when he crashed a plane trying to get the perfect shot. He was badly hurt, suffering head injuries that affected him for months. Many people wondered if the movie was cursed because so many tragedies piled up.
Another film that's worth reviewing has gone down in history as being the most expensive movie ever made at the time of its release. Howard Hughes' 1930 World War I aviation epic, Hell's Angels.
Hughes' drive for spectacular scenes pushed people close to their limits. The set felt heavy with fear, and some actors reportedly had nightmares about flying. When Hell's Angels was finally released, it was one of the most expensive films ever made at that time. Audiences were amazed by the breathtaking flying scenes, but they didn't know the full story of how many people were hurt, or worse, while filming them. Like Wings, it's hard to say if a real curse was involved or if it was simply a result of risky stunts. But the memory of these crashes and lost lives made Hell's Angels a legendary example of how chasing big thrills can come with a tragic price. The Mummy, 1932. Legends of an Ancient Curse. The Mummy was one of Universal Studios' classic monster movies. It featured actor Boris Karloff as Imhotep.
Boris Karloff, the Egyptian prince, and the mummy, who is Imhotep. I'm going to butcher these names. He's compelling. Nicely horrifying in his performance, very still, very controlled.
An ancient Egyptian priest who returns from the dead. The film's storyline involved secret tombs and an ancient curse placed on anyone who disturbed a pharaoh's resting place. Strangely, some of the film's crew reported eerie incidents on set. Props would mysteriously go missing, and a few people got hurt by falling set pieces. One rumor said that a studio employee became very sick after handling certain Egyptian props. Although no one proved these events were connected to an actual curse, stories spread that maybe the movie carried the curse of the pharaohs. Boris Karloff himself suffered from the heavy makeup and long hours of filming. He developed back problems after being wrapped in tight bandages and forced to stand still for long periods. Even after the movie, he complained that his back never fully healed. Some fans joked that the ancient curse had come for Karloff off-screen. Despite the scary rumors, The Mummy was a huge success. It also kicked off a whole era of mummy-themed horror films. But if you ask film historians, they'll say the accidents were probably normal on a movie set in the 1930s, where safety rules weren't strict. However, the eerie storyline about an Egyptian curse made every mishap seem much more mysterious. People still love to wonder if The Mummy was touched by something ancient and spooky.
Could get my hands on you, I'd break your dried flesh to pieces.
4. Tarzan the Ape Man. 1932. Wild animals and wild accidents. Tarzan the Ape Man introduced audiences to the jungle hero Tarzan, played by Johnny Weissmuller, a former Olympic swimmer. Filming this movie was a daring adventure. Much of it took place near real wild animals, like lions, elephants, and chimps. While this added excitement, it also brought serious danger. One stunt performer was clawed by a lion and needed medical care. Another time, an elephant grew upset during a scene and nearly trampled a camera crew. The thick jungle settings were hot and humid, making everyone sweat and tire easily. Cast and crew often got sick from strange bugs and waterborne illnesses. The scariest moments were the unplanned run-ins with animals. In those days, sets didn't always use professional animal handlers or strong safety barriers, so any small mistake could lead to a major accident. Many people whispered that this film was cursed because of all the injuries and illnesses. Some said the jungle itself was punishing outsiders for filming there. Despite these troubles, Tarzan the Ape Man was a box office smash, and it sparked many sequels. Viewers loved watching Tarzan swing through the trees and wrestle lions. Johnny Weissmuller became a huge star, known for his famous Tarzan yell. Yet, for the cast and crew, the memory of real danger stayed with them. Today, when people talk about cursed Golden Age films, Tarzan the Ape Man often appears on the list.
Tarzan the Ape Man is a 1932 pre-code action-adventure film featuring Edgar Rice Burroughs' jungle hero, Tarzan.
Proving that filming in wild places can lead to very real perils. 5. Saratoga, 1937. Death of a Star. Saratoga was supposed to be another fun, romantic movie starring Jean Harlow and Clark Gable. Jean Harlow was a bright, young star known as the Blonde Bombshell. She had a big fan base, and everyone expected the film to do well. But during the shoot, Harlow suddenly fell ill. The cast and crew first thought she had a minor sickness, but her condition quickly got worse. She struggled to stand for her scenes and felt extreme pain. Doctors realized she had kidney failure, which was very hard to treat in the 1930s. Tragically, Jean Harlow died before filming was completed. She was only 26 years old. The studio was left in shock. Fans were devastated. To finish Saratoga, they used a stand-in for Jean's final scenes, filming her at a distance or covering her face. Audiences could tell something was off. Many people said the movie was cursed because it claimed the life of its leading lady. Even though Saratoga eventually reached theaters, it felt strange watching Jean Harlow on screen, knowing she had passed away.
Jean Harlow has died. The world of moviegoers mourn the vivacious blonde bombshell who has died of uremic poisoning in the very flower of her youth.
Her sudden death cast a dark shadow over the movie. Some fans refused to see the film because it made them too sad. Others watched it as a final tribute to the star they loved. Saratoga reminds us how fragile life can be, even for the brightest stars. Some still wonder if this movie was truly cursed, or if it was simply a case of tragic timing and a serious illness that doctors couldn't treat in time. 6. The Wizard of Oz, 1939. Magic with a dark side. Almost everyone knows The Wizard of Oz. It's a classic story about Dorothy, who is swept away by a tornado to the magical land of Oz. While the movie looks bright and cheerful, the production was filled with accidents and illnesses that made many call it cursed. First, the actress who was supposed to play the Wicked Witch's green-skinned henchman had a serious problem with her costume makeup. The makeup contained copper, which caused a bad reaction. Later, Margaret Hamilton, who actually played the Wicked Witch, was severely burned in a stunt gone wrong. She had to recover for weeks before returning to film. The original actor cast as the Tin Man, Buddy Ebsen, had such a bad reaction to the aluminum powder in his makeup that he almost died. He was replaced by Jack Haley, and the studio changed the makeup formula. But these issues made people whisper that the movie was under a dangerous spell. Judy Garland, who played Dorothy, also suffered during filming. She worked long hours and followed a strict diet forced on her by the studio. This stress was one of many problems that haunted her later in life. Even the cute dog, Toto, was accidentally stepped on by a cast member and had to rest for a few days. Despite these troubles, The Wizard of Oz became one of the most beloved films ever made.
I'm here with a super duper awesome classic movie, and this one is called The Wizard of Oz, and I actually just got this yesterday at Dollar General, and this is honestly a really cool movie.
But for those who worked on it, the road down that yellow brick road wasn't always so bright, whether it was curses or just poor on-set safety. The film's behind-the-scenes stories have kept audiences talking for decades. 7. Gone with the Wind, 1939. Stormy behind the scenes. Gone with the Wind is one of the most famous films of all time. It won multiple Academy Awards and starred Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable. On camera, it's a sweeping love story set during the American Civil War. Behind the scenes, however, it was troubled by production problems, sudden cast changes, and personal tragedies. First, the film's original director, George Cukor, was replaced by Victor Fleming mid-production. There were rumors about disagreements and tension among the top stars. Leslie Howard, who played Ashley Wilkes, hated playing the role and was unhappy on set. Vivien Leigh was under a lot of stress. The filming schedule was long and exhausting, and the heavy dresses, along with the hot lights, made her life difficult. She often grew frustrated and argued with others on set. Later in life, she battled mental health issues, leading some to label the film cursed for pushing its stars to the edge. Another tragic note happened after the movie came out. Leslie Howard died a few years later in an airplane crash during World War II.
Investigators looked for motives on the passenger list. Among the dead was Gone with the Wind actor Leslie Howard. The English heartthrob had left Hollywood behind to make anti-Nazi propaganda.
Fans saw that as part of the bad luck swirling around the film. Even though these problems may not seem as eerie as a ghostly curse, many still point to all the misfortune and the stress that struck its cast and crew. The question remains, was Gone with the Wind truly cursed? Or was it simply a very big, very challenging production? 8. Ben-Hur, 1925. The silent epic with real tragedy. Before the famous 1959 version of Ben-Hur, starring Charlton Heston, there was a silent 1925 version. This earlier film was massive in scale. It had giant chariot races, thousands of extras, and a grand set. But it also had several tragic accidents. The chariot race scenes were filmed using real horses, real chariots, and real racetracks. Safety rules were not strong back then. Some horses collapsed and died from exhaustion. Several stunt riders were badly hurt when their chariots flipped or crashed. One rumor says a stuntman even lost his life, although the studio tried to hide this from the public. Aside from the race, other scenes needed large sets and complex stunts. Fires broke out more than once. Actors and extras got injured when props broke or fell unexpectedly.
He didn't just jump with the horses, he was thrown in the air. He did a handstand and threw himself clear. When Willie saw that scene in dailies,
the production faced constant delays and went way over budget. Some people joked that the film was a money pit that might never be finished. Although the finished movie wowed audiences in the silent era, the many on-set dangers made people wonder if Ben-Hur was jinxed. The curses, if any, might have come from the huge ambition to make everything bigger and grander than ever before. In the end, Ben-Hur paved the way for later epics. But it also stands as a warning that aiming for jaw-dropping scenes without proper safety can bring real sorrow. Fans still talk about those rumored tragedies, which add to the idea that this silent classic was haunted by its own scale. 9. Rebel Without a Cause, 1955. A trio of tragedies. Rebel Without a Cause starred the legendary actor James Dean as a troubled teenager. The film also featured Natalie Wood and Sal Mineo. Today, it's known as a groundbreaking movie about teenage rebellion, but it's also considered cursed because of the tragic fates of its three main stars. James Dean died in a terrible car crash shortly before the movie was released.
Dean is well remembered for the handful of films in which he appeared, as well as the promise he showed as an actor. But he was also recognized as an avid racer of cars, and his death in a crash occurred on his way to a race in California. Dean was driving a Porsche 550 Spyder, which, in 1955,
he was only 24 years old. This alone shocked fans everywhere. Then, in 1976, Sal Mineo was stabbed to death near his home. He was just 37. Finally, in 1981, Natalie Wood drowned under strange circumstances off the coast of California. She was 43. All three young stars faced sudden, tragic ends. It was enough to make people whisper about a rebel without a cause curse. They pointed out that three leads dying in unusual ways was more than just coincidence. Some even claimed that the troubled spirit of the movie lived on in real life. Other actors from the film, like Dennis Hopper, had their own troubles, but none as fatal as those three. Whether it's a true curse or just a string of sad events, Rebel Without a Cause reminds us that life can be fragile. The film remains an important piece of Hollywood history. James Dean's performance, in particular, turned him into a legend, partly because he died so young. Fans still watch it, feeling the eerie vibe of a movie whose stars all met untimely ends. Is it a curse or just heartbreak? That's for each viewer to decide. Giant, 1956. More trouble for James Dean. Right after filming Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean started working on Giant, a story about a wealthy Texas family. The cast included big names like Rock Hudson, and James Dean died in his car crash not long after finishing his scenes. Elizabeth Taylor. But tragedy struck again. This time, the loss shocked the Giant cast and crew, who had come to admire Dean's talent. Some of his lines had to be re-recorded by another actor because Dean was gone. Later, more sadness followed. Rock Hudson struggled with serious health problems later in life, eventually passing away from AIDS-related issues in 1985.
Actor Rock Hudson dead, his year-long battle with AIDS at an end. He was 59. Hudson died quietly in his sleep this morning at his home in Beverly Hills.
At a time when many misunderstood the disease, Sal Mineo, who had a small role, would also face a tragic end, as mentioned before. People began connecting the dots, seeing a pattern of bad luck for those linked to James Dean's final films. They wondered if Giant had a shadow over it because of Dean's early death. Yet, Giant became a huge success, winning an Oscar for Best Director and earning many more nominations. For fans, though, Giant can feel bittersweet. You watch James Dean's last performance, knowing he never saw the film hit theaters. It's a reminder of how short and unpredictable life can be. Whether you believe in curses or not, the multiple tragedies surrounding Giant make it one of Hollywood's saddest behind-the-scenes stories. 11. The Conqueror, 1956. Radiation and fatal illness. The Conqueror is often called one of the most unfortunate Hollywood movies ever made. It starred John Wayne as Mongol leader Genghis Khan, an odd choice that caused plenty of raised eyebrows. But the real tragedy was where they filmed it, near a nuclear test site in Utah.
Organizations are calling on lawmakers to support Utahns exposed to nuclear testing.
In the 1950s, the U.S. government tested atomic bombs in the nearby desert. Radioactive fallout often drifted to surrounding areas. No one realized how dangerous it was. Or, if they did, they didn't warn the movie crew. So, the cast and crew spent weeks in this location, breathing in dust that might have been radioactive. Over the next few decades, many people who worked on The Conqueror developed cancer. Stars like John Wayne, Susan Hayward, and Agnes Moorehead were among those who became seriously ill. A large percentage of the movie's team died from cancer-related illnesses. Even crew members who helped with sets and equipment reported sicknesses later in life. People began to call The Conqueror the cursed movie, or the film that killed John Wayne. Scientists still debate how much of their illnesses were truly caused by radiation exposure, and how much might have been normal cancer rates. But for many, the large number of cases seems like more than a coincidence. The tragedy of The Conqueror is that so many lives were lost or harmed, possibly because of filming in a dangerous place. Whether or not you believe it's cursed, the sad outcome reminds us how important safety and caution are, especially when dealing with unseen threats like radiation. 12. The African Queen, 1951.
Starring Academy Award winner Humphrey Bogart.
Mr. Allnut.
I'm still right here, miss.
Academy Award winner Katharine Hepburn. And directed by the legendary John Huston.
Jungle Trials and Illness. Filmed on location in Africa, The African Queen stars Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. This classic adventure follows a captain and a missionary traveling down a river during World War I. Making the movie was a huge challenge. The hot, humid jungle climate was tough on everyone. Diseases carried by mosquitoes and bad drinking water made many in the cast and crew sick. Katharine Hepburn suffered from terrible stomach problems that often left her weak. Crew members fought off malaria, and they worried about crocodiles and other dangerous wildlife. Humphrey Bogart later joked that he and the director, John Huston, stayed healthy by drinking whiskey instead of water. While that sounds funny, it shows how unsafe the water was. People said the film was cursed because of how close the cast and crew came to disaster. Equipment also broke down in the unforgiving climate, causing long delays. Yet, despite these struggles, The African Queen was a triumph. Bogart even won his only Best Actor Oscar for his performance.
The nominees are Humphrey Bogart in The African Queen, Horizon Enterprises Incorporated, United Artists.
Katharine Hepburn also earned praise. However, the behind-the-scenes stories of sickness and exhaustion led many to say the film's production was jinxed by the jungle. Whether you call it a curse or just tropical hazards, The African Queen proved that shooting on location can be very risky. The final movie was brilliant, but the hard experiences of the people who made it became almost as legendary as the film itself. 13. Raintree County, 1957. Tragedy for Montgomery Clift. Raintree County was a Civil War epic starring Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift. It was supposed to be a romantic and dramatic tale. But one night during filming, Montgomery Clift drove away from a dinner party at Elizabeth Taylor's house and crashed his car. He was horribly injured, breaking his jaw and nose and smashing his teeth.
This is the house that used to belong to Elizabeth Taylor, and it was here, she was married to Michael Wilding, that Montgomery Clift had his infamous car accident. I'm going to show you that site in a minute.
The accident turned into a tragedy for Clift's career and life. His face needed reconstructive surgery, and he was never the same on screen. He experienced chronic pain and became dependent on medications and alcohol. Some said the movie was cursed because its star suffered a life-changing crash right in the middle of production. Though Clift bravely returned to finish filming, viewers noticed he looked different in various scenes, before and after the crash. This caused sadness among fans who remembered his earlier roles, where he was known for his striking good looks and smooth acting style. Raintree County didn't become the huge hit the studio hoped for, and it's often remembered mainly for the accident that hurt Montgomery Clift so severely. Some say it's another example of how a promising movie can turn into a nightmare behind the scenes. People also wondered if Elizabeth Taylor blamed herself, since the crash happened after he left her party. Whether it was truly a curse, bad luck, or just a tragic accident, Raintree County carried a heavy burden from that fateful night onward. 14. The Misfits, 1961. Final roles for big stars. The Misfits is a drama starring Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, and Montgomery Clift.
Which is the 1961 Marilyn Monroe film. So Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, Montgomery Clift. It's both Monroe and Gable's last film.
The screenplay was written by Arthur Miller, who was Marilyn Monroe's husband at the time. The story follows a group of troubled people in Nevada who capture wild horses. Filming was stressful for Monroe, who was dealing with personal problems and feeling unwell. She missed shooting days, and production ran behind schedule. Meanwhile, Clark Gable was already in poor health, but he kept pushing himself to do his own stunts. After filming ended, Gable suffered a heart attack and died soon after. This shocked everyone, as he was known as the King of Hollywood. Not long after, Marilyn Monroe died in 1962 from a drug overdose. She was only 36, and The Misfits was her final completed film. Montgomery Clift, also in declining health, died a few years later in 1966. Watching The Misfits can be eerie because it's the last time these stars appeared on screen, and all three died soon afterward. Fans believe The Misfits was cursed because of the tragic ends faced by its main cast. Each star had personal struggles, but the timing was uncanny. Many saw it as a sign that this film was jinxed, overshadowed by sorrow. Whether or not there was a real curse, The Misfits became a haunting piece of Hollywood history, the final bow for some of Tinseltown's biggest legends, locked forever in a story that felt all too real. 15. Cleopatra, 1963. A mountain of mishaps. Though Cleopatra edges out of the classic golden age by a few years,
one of the most expensive films ever produced was Cleopatra. The movie had a $5 million initial budget, but after 2 years more money kept being invested in it because it wasn't finished, bringing the total to around $370 million with today's inflation.
Many still group it with older Hollywood epics. It was a massive production starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Right from the start, the movie ran into terrible luck. Filming began in England, where the weather was cold and damp, not exactly the right setting for ancient Egypt. Elizabeth Taylor got so sick with pneumonia that she nearly died. Production shut down until she recovered. The set had to be rebuilt from scratch in Italy, costing a fortune. The movie's budget grew larger and larger until it was one of the most expensive films ever made. On top of that, Liz Taylor and Richard Burton began a scandalous love affair during filming. Both were married to other people, and the press hounded them everywhere. Public opinion turned sour, and some countries even tried to ban the movie because of their immoral behavior. Costumes got lost, sets collapsed, and crew members complained of exhaustion. Some called it a cursed production because everything that could go wrong seemed to go wrong. When Cleopatra finally came out, it was 4 hours long and almost bankrupt its studio. However, the movie still dazzled many viewers with its lavish sets and dazzling costumes. Elizabeth Taylor's health scare and the huge scandals overshadowed the film's achievements. Even today, when people talk about cursed or troubled productions, Cleopatra is high on the list for its endless stream of bad luck. So what do you think was which movie was the most cursed of all? And do let us know if you want us to make another video on this topic.